to our top story, the latest on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky is today stepping up criticism of NATO, questioning the alliance's commitment to its Article 5 collective defense clause. The Ukrainian president saying in a video address that Article 5 is weaker than ever before. NATO has not sent troops to defend Ukraine, which is not a member of the Western military alliance. Zelensky has now also told a UK-led joint expeditionary force that Ukraine should accept that it will not become a NATO member. So for more on what's happening on the ground, we now go live to the Ukrainian capital. We welcome journalist Tim Judah from The Economist, and he is there in Kyiv. Thank you so much, Tim, for your time. To start, the latest on the ground, reports of continued Russian airstrikes and shelling in several parts on this day. I understand you were at an apartment building that was targeted. What are you seeing on the ground? What can you tell us?
I mean, it just feels like something's changing here because actually the center of Kyiv over the last, since February the 24th, since the invasion began, has actually been quite quiet. I mean, we hear stuff, but it's all happening on the outskirts or in nearby suburban towns. But yesterday, that there were 2 missile attacks, or at least 1 missile attack, and possibly another explosion caused by a missile which had been downed or intercepted. It's not clear. And then there were 4 attacks today. I can see that you're showing on screen the most serious of those attacks, which happened this morning, which was a 16-story block with homes for about 250 to 300 people, and that was really completely destroyed this morning. It happened in the early morning, and it was blazing for hours and hours afterwards. And they were using those telescopic ladders to rescue people, way up in the high stories who couldn't get out of their flats because of smoke and fire.
And Tim, what are people on the ground saying when you're describing what you're seeing right now? It's such a desperate situation. How are people getting food, access to water, power? What are you seeing and hearing on the ground in the capital?
There is power, there's water, there's internet. All the utilities are working in the city. They're not working in places like Irpin or some of the suburban towns where there's fighting. But here in the capital, they're working. There's not much open in the city. There's some supermarkets open. They're kind of depleted, but there is food. People are having more trouble in pharmacies because if they're after some particular medicine, then some of those medicines have run out. Otherwise, people have adapted to a sort of a non-normal life here in the city. But as I say, all the main things, for the moment, they're still working. Power, heating, water, communications, they're fine.
And when it comes to leaders and the role that they are taking, when you hear the prime ministers of the Czech Republic, Poland, Slovenia are arriving in the capital, they came by train. It's a huge show of support given what you're describing in the capital. Talk us through the significance of these leaders heading there to meet in person with Volodymyr Zelensky. How's it being perceived in Ukraine?
I think that Ukrainians are grateful for any support like that, and it's very brave of these leaders to be here in such a moment. Whether in the long run it will make much difference is another question. But I think that they will be respected for having done so, and for showing European solidarity at just such a moment.
We're talking a little bit earlier about the messaging out of the Ukrainian president. It's a change of tactic or tone, potentially. Having pleaded to become a member of NATO, he's now saying that Ukraine must understand it will not become a member of the alliance. That's amidst reports that this is the main red line for Russia in negotiations. Will the Ukrainian parliament likely accept this? Their constitution includes wanting to join NATO. What are you hearing? What are officials there likely to say in response to this latest development?
I mean, I think we have to wait and see, because it depends, what any sort of a package deal, if there is, to end the fighting, amounts to. If neutrality is the price, but Ukrainian sovereignty is returned to all of the country, including the Donbass and including Crimea, then I suppose that will be something that Ukrainians could accept. But let's wait and see.
Meanwhile, officials are saying that more than 3 million civilians, mostly women and children, have already fled the country. We are seeing the footage of men going back to fight, but women and children continuing to neighbouring countries. Talk to us about the stories you are hearing, what you are covering, and the stories and ordeals that you're hearing about there.
I mean, the main thing is that, the 3 million is a sort of headline figure because it's the number of people who have crossed out of the country and become refugees. And therefore, we can count them. But I think there's probably, maybe multiples of that number who have fled from towns and cities all over the country, including Kyiv, of course, into the countryside, they've gone to their holiday homes or the ancestral village, or the village where the grandparents are. So, for example, here in Kyiv, no one knows how many people there are. Before the war, this was a city of 3 million people. Maybe there's only 50% of the population here now, or 40%. We really have no idea. As for people wanting to fight, I think that there's really thousands, tens of thousands of people who want to come and fight and defend the country, and it's very easy to do so because they set up just before the war, they set up something called the Territorial Defence Force, which is a second line defence force. People get 3 days training and they're given a gun, but they're put in second line positions, like, for example, checkpoints here in Kyiv, guarding metro stations, guarding buildings, and that enables the serious, experienced fighters, the professional fighters, professional soldiers, sorry, I should say, to engage the Russians on the front line. I mean, so it's released a lot of manpower to do that.